So I'm coming at you with a bit of a different video today. I was inspired by Maria, honeydewmochi here on YouTube, to talk about the album packaging design that I liked and didn't like from 2021. So I am also a graphic designer, and so I thought it would be fun to give you my own perspective on the albums that I did buy. I don't buy a lot of albums from various groups. I kind of only buy albums from the groups I collect, which isn't a lot, or if I really love the album, I'll buy it. So I don't have a wide variety, but I figured I would kind of just talk about the albums I did buy, and talk about what I thought was successful, what I thought could have been better, and yeah, let's get into it. The first group that I want to talk about is Oneus. So they actually came out with many albums this year. So I kind of want to look back and talk about the things I liked and what I think the design really excelled at and what things I would have changed. So first, hello Tuna. Back in January, Oneus released their Devil album. And now what's pretty consistent with Oneus album packaging is that they often do these contained boxes, which I have a preference for. I think that these are sturdy. They help keep the contents of the album inside from getting dusty when they sit on your shelf, and they're easy to store that way. So I have a preference for these boxes. And I will say, I don't have all of the albums from Devil. There's a black version that I did not get because to me the black was not exciting. I preferred the green and yellow version because I thought these colors were more exciting, and I like that they kept the design simple. However, I thought it leaned a little too boring for me and dark, and I think the shadows on the cover here, they read a bit too dark to me. However, with Oneus's Binary Code album, this art design is also rather simple, but I think where this design succeeded and this one kind of fell short a little bit is really the execution of the theme of the album. Binary Code, it's pretty self-explanatory. They really went in on the Binary Code Black Mirror digital-esque theme for this design, and it's very simplistic, but they have this, at least in this version, this is the 1 version and there's a 0 version, but I wanted the 1 version because I liked it more. They have this like CMYK sheen to it. They have this pixelated effect with their logo. They have a very smart typography choice. I think everything is very cohesive and really drives home the theme of the album, and that's why I think it's successful. It's simple and yet successful and executed well. Whereas the Devil album, I feel like could have been executed in a slightly more interesting way. But I think my absolute favorite album design from Oneus this year was for Blood Moon. Before I get into these two versions, which are the Blood and Gray version, I want to quickly talk about Oneus theater version. I bought this because I liked the photos in the photo book, and I liked the design here and the color blue, so there are elements that I do like about this. However, I don't like large photo books like this because I find them harder to store. And Atlantis from Shiny I also bought this year, and one of the Red Velvet Queendom versions was a large photo book as well, and although they're pretty, I find those types of albums a lot harder to store and more annoying to store. But let's get into these two versions of the album which I think the design team executed perfectly. I think the color story is deep and rich and striking, and just the overall design of the album, again, it drives home the concept of the album. I think when you immediately look at a design and know what it's about, then you've got it, you've nailed it. So I think this looks really elegant, really sleek. How they changed the logo to fit the more traditional mixed with modern theme that they did in this album. I think it's really impressive, and it looks really cool, and it looks great on a shelf. Like the spine is interesting with the silver detailing. So I think overall this is probably my favorite Oneus packaging from this year. It did a really good job, and it looks really elegant. The next group I want to talk about is also from RBW, and it is Purple Kiss, and they're a new group. So there's not really a ton to go off of because these are the only albums that they've ever come out with. But when I was going through my shelf and looking at, the possible albums that I could discuss, there was something that I wanted to point out. And like I mentioned with Oneus, I think it mainly has to do with successfully incorporating the concept of the album into the packaging design. So although I do like this, like I mentioned before, I like boxes. I think they're easy to store. They look good on a shelf. Things don't get dusty. They're functional. The functionality is there. But it's a little boring. And with this album, they were kind of going for this royal, elegant theme in the imagery, and I feel like they could have played into that more. I think using a script font, although I understand wanting to use a script font because that does come across as more elegant, I think this is a little difficult to read, and legibility is important, obviously. And the pale purple that they chose, I would have done something darker, something richer, something that really drove home that royal feel, because purple is a royal color. So I would have done a darker, deeper, richer violet tone, a true violet. And there's one element about this that I actually do like. This holographic element I think is more fun and more interesting, and I feel like they could have played with this more on the design around here to make it more striking. So those are just some things that I probably would have changed if given the option. However, on the flip side, for their second album, Hide and Seek, I think the creative team did a fantastic job. I think for Hide and Seek, they really drove home the fun pop art 60s references that they had through in their online imagery and the music video. I really think they did a great job of incorporating those feelings into the packaging design. And although I don't like the plastic sleeve, things are still contained better because this is still a box just with a plastic cover over it. But I think what I like the most about the Hide and Seek album is the color story and the typography. I think this bright magenta and this bright green are so fun and unique, and how they did this distorted drippy effect with the logo for Hide and Seek, again to drive home that the zombie comic book pop art motif that they had. I just thought it was so fun. I think this is really fun and really striking, and when I heard this album, when I saw this album, this is what made me want to buy Purple Kiss in the first place. So I think that speaks volumes as well. Now, Enhypen is actually one of the first groups that I thought of when I was trying to think of the different albums that I wanted to talk about, because I feel like with these two Enhypen albums, it is really a study in simplicity. I talked about it earlier with Oneus. Personally, in my own design, I really do like simplicity. I like minimalism. I think it's really striking when executed well. And I think this is kind of two sides of that struggle. I think you have an album design that is simple but not executed as well, versus an album design that is simple but executed extremely well, in my opinion. You know, art is subjective, design is subjective. Everything about this is subjective, but to me, I think that they could have pushed the box a bit more. I think that they could have done more playing into the vampire sort of like royalty element that they had throughout the imagery of this album and this concept that they went with. What I would have done, so I don't mind this color story, but I think to make it a bit more interesting, instead of having the different like metallic, they have red, gold, and silver, I would have made the metallic gold a motif throughout all the different albums, and I would have played up that motif more. Maybe done some type of square, off-kilter square on the outside like they have here, again to tie in more of this design on the outside. And to me, these are little things. Like, I don't dislike this, but I think it could have been pushed more. And I think that's the thing. There could have been more to it. Whereas with the Dimension Dilemma album, I think they did a really good job getting across the dilemma. I mean, it's literally called Dimension Dilemma. And I think the typography on the outside of the album, the way that it's mirrored, the way that it's broken up and distorted, I really think drives home the concept, the overarching concept of the album. And I also really liked the color story that they went with these albums. I thought it was really interesting. The first time when they posted the specs online for the first time and I saw this color story, I was like, wow, that is really interesting. I've never seen that before. So I think that's also what really interested me and wanted me, like, I wanted to buy this album because I thought it was interesting. So I think coming from the same group, you know, one aspect of simplicity was successful and one, in my opinion, was not so much. The next group I want to talk about is Dreamcatcher and their summer holiday series. Now, what I liked the most about the summer holiday series is that it was completely different, in my opinion, to albums that they came out with in the past. For their Dystopia series, all of the albums had a very similar design because they were all part of the same series, and it was very dark and very serious. And I feel like because they are moving away from the Dystopia series and doing something new, they also translated that newness into their packaging design, which I think was smart. And it was fun. The colors, it's fun, it's vibrant, it's perfect for the summer. And what I liked the most, I think, about the albums was the interesting shapes that they used on the cover. In my own personal branding, I use what I call organic shapes and layer them to create, you know, kind of patterns within patterns. And this is kind of similar. They have interesting lines, circles, metallic parts. I like the use of the geometric shapes, and I like the color palette and the layering that they did. I think it's really fun, and it was new for them, and I think that's why it spoke to me. All right, next we're gonna talk about some albums that I didn't particularly like the design of, and I don't know why Big Hit has started to do this, but it started with Blue Hour, where they started doing this weird sort of semi-opaque plastic outer packaging, and it drives me nuts because I think this makes it look cheap. It's flimsy. Every time I order an album, one always comes broken. It happened with Blue Hour, it happened with Freeze. I don't know why they're doing this, because TXT's earlier albums, they were doing like the boxes like I talked about before that I like storing those on my shelves better. And then for some reason they started doing this, and it just grinds my gears. I will say I do like for Freeze, they did this broken apart typography, like it was icicles breaking apart. I do think that's interesting. I'm not the biggest fan of the color story. I appreciate that with TXT they always play with the TXT logo in an interesting way. You know, they always change up the logo to fit with the concept of the album. So I do appreciate that. The color story specifically, though, I found slightly boring. And now with Fight or Escape, again, it's the color story. I think this packaging is slightly better because it's a booklet, not a booklet, it's a book. So it's slightly more contained, whereas like everything in here is like loose. Like once you take it out, it's loose. Here it's more contained because it's a book. However, you open it and everything kind of like falls out like that. So I find it's hard to, I just find these hard to store. And now I'm going to keep this open. What I wish they would have done more for the outer packaging is play with this pink more, because I think the pink is a fun and vibrant color and it's more exciting than the gray or the blue. And so that's kind of why I was a little disappointed when these came out, because it was just underwhelming to me. But alas. Next up, I'm going to talk about the ATEEZ album design, which I think is a pretty contentious subject amongst ATEEZ. And I will say right off the bat that this is not my favorite. I appreciate that across the board, very consistently, ATEEZ always does the boxes. You know, I like that. Said it before, I'll say it again. I like that. It's easier to store. It's functional. I like it. But I think my biggest gripe with a lot of ATEEZ's album, but particularly the Fever series, is the color choices. They're very bland to me. And I'll spread these out so you'll see. But this red, yellow, and blue are just straight up the primary colors. And I'm like, why? There is an entire color wheel for you to choose from, and you go with the primary colors. Why? The thing I like about this album is the continuation of the flame across all three albums. I think that's a really cool touch. I think it makes it look interesting. I think it's interesting when it's sitting on the shelf as well, and you get it on the spine too. So I do like that. I genuinely do like that. But the colors, like they could have chosen a more orangey red instead of a true red. They could have chosen a more orangey yellow instead of the true yellow. There were options, and I don't know why they went for the primary colors. And now on the flip side, when we have Fever Part 3 over here, for this, they did not do an interesting cover design. I think that this is very boring. I don't mind these colors as much as the primary colors over here, but still, I feel like they're very bland. I would have done like deeper, richer tones, more on the jewel tone side maybe. I don't know, I feel like there's just something missing, and there's a richness that is missing from these colors. I just look at these colors and I feel nothing. And I understand that they wanted to continue the elongated E throughout these, throughout the whole Fever series, but this like gradient thing that they did, I don't understand the purpose. I don't understand the tie-in with the album. Whereas over here we had the flame, because their title track was Bulnoria. So I'm probably just butchered how you say that, but like it makes sense. It makes sense that they did this flame design. This doesn't make sense to me. And I wish that I could design ATEEZ's album art for them so badly. And I don't have Fever Epilogue because it literally just came out, so my albums have not arrived to me yet. But I will say, from pictures I've seen online, it seems like that album has a bit of texture on the outside, which I think could be interesting and kind of mimics this like vintage graduation vibe they were going with for that concept. So that could at least be slightly more interesting, but we'll have to see. For the grand finale though, we have what I think is the best album packaging of 2021. I think what he did with this retro packaging across all his albums, I only bought this one version, but across every single version, he executed it so perfectly, and it made me want to buy every single version. I had to refrain. But what I love the most first is that I am a huge Trekkie, and so the Star Trek vibes are completely off the scale, and I absolutely love it, and I think it's fantastic and fun, and it made me want to buy the album. You aren't supposed to judge a book by its cover, but everyone does. And even before I heard the album, and I love the album itself, but even before I heard it, I saw the design and I was like, oh my god, I need it. But what I also love is that each version is playing into some type of retro aspect. You have that space gun, laser gun, like toy packaging. This is supposed to like mimic the old cereal boxes where we used to get a toy in the cereal box. I just think that they made such smart, creative, clever, fun decisions when it came to this packaging design. And the colors too. The colors are vibrant, they're fun, they're otherworldly. There are unique shades in here. They look at that and you're like, oh, wow, that really does give you that space vibe. And the typography too is so fun. Like, this is embossed a little bit, but I'm gonna open it up. So on the inside, let me put this to the side. So this is what the photo cards came in for me, and I loved it so much that I kept it. But again, like the slight changes in the logo, using all of the colors in their color palette, I think is really fun. they just chose really interesting, vibrant colors that really drive home that retro 80s Star Trek feel. Like, he really just went all in, and he didn't miss. He didn't miss whatsoever. And this design, I absolutely love. They're like, it also a reference in the song Helium, Judy Jetson. It kind of reminds me of the Jetsons too. It gives me those Jetsons vibe. I just think everything is so clever and so well executed and everything ties in so perfectly together with the overall retro theme of the album. And they did such a fantastic job. So that was my review, I guess you could say, on the 2021 K-pop album packaging designs for the albums that I bought, because there's many albums that I did not buy, so this is just limited to the albums that I did buy. But I think it's fun to talk about these things because so much of my life is about design, so it's kind of fun to bring that into another hobby of mine, which is K-pop, and you know, just talk about graphic design because I love it. So let me know which album designs you liked or didn't like from this year, and I'll leave Maria's video in the description because she also has some interesting takes. And I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a little different from what I've done before, but I think it's fun, and I'll probably continue doing stuff like this. So I'll see you next time, guys. Bye.